So I watched Don't Breathe 1 yesterday morning for the very first time ever, and I really enjoyed the film for the most part. I enjoyed the aesthetics and the setting, the environment, and even the camera work, and I just really enjoyed how it felt claustrophobic, it felt darkened, but also livened up. It had a very original premise, and I enjoyed Don't Breathe. I didn't really care for the characters overall because literally none of them were likable or even relatable. They were all criminals, every single character. And there were a couple predictable and cliche narrative points by the end of it. Now, fast forward, and I know I just watched it yesterday morning, but it released in, 2016, I believe. Fast forward 5 years later, we get the sequel, Don't Breathe 2. And the first Don't Breathe was written and directed by Fede Alvarez, who helmed the Evil Dead remake, which I wanted to bring that up as well. I really enjoyed the Evil Dead remake. I never watched the original, but I know the original had a lot of humor, and the remake cut out a lot of the humor, but they focused on the Evil Dead remake, they focused on just all-out gore and shock value, and I really enjoyed Evil Dead. So honestly, right now, as it stands, Fede Alvarez, I really enjoy his films. I went into Don't Breathe 2 expecting a Fede Alvarez enjoyable film. Unfortunately, I didn't realize this wasn't him directing it. He was a co-writer, but the other writer for Don't Breathe and Don't Breathe 2 is actually helming the direction for Don't Breathe 2. And I honestly don't even remember what his name was in the credits. Don't Breathe 2 is not bad, it's not terrible, but it's nowhere near as great as the first Don't Breathe. And I know every single sequel is like that, but the positives of Don't Breathe 2 are essentially the same as the first one. The aesthetics, the camera work. The problem I have with Don't Breathe 2 is that everything that's done well is not ever done as well as the first one. And that's not even saying that everything in Don't Breathe 2 was done well. Honestly, not that much was done well. The best thing about Don't Breathe 2 is the setting, the cinematography, and the camera work. But ultimately, Don't Breathe 2 relies a lot more on cliche. And not just for horror genre. Here's a little bit of spoilers, but halfway through Don't Breathe 2, I started feeling like a Last of Us vibe coming from the story and the narrative beats. Older man looking after little girl, and then little girl gets taken. Little girl about gets operated on. It's very, very reminiscent of Last of Us, excluding the zombies. Now, Don't Breathe 2, there were parts in the narrative where I thought I wouldn't like them. Like, for example, when animals get killed, I don't like animals getting killed, whether it's in real life, in films, or even in games. With that being said, there are animals that get killed in Don't Breathe 2, but they are killed effectively with an effective narrative plot device involving their death. I really, really appreciated that. It wasn't just a sacrificed animal just because shock value and gore. I really appreciated that part of the plot devices. As far as the characters go in Don't Breathe 2, there's at least one character that's relatable and likable, at the very least, and that's the little girl. Everybody else in Don't Breathe 2, they are even worse characters than the first one. None of them are likable. Even the characters from the first one are even more despised because they explain why they're a bad guy by the end of the film. And don't get me wrong, in both Don't Breathes, I root for the people that are getting their houses broken into and kidnapped and tortured, because once you break into a home, it's self-defense. Be as gruesome as you can be towards the perpetrator. At the end of the day, you are defending yourself. That is self-defense, and I completely lawfully justify that as just protecting yourself. Now, the problem I have is in Don't Breathe 1, the blind man just kind of held back, just kind of using his blind instincts to basically terrorize the kids. In Don't Breathe 2, everybody's just looking to kill at one another, and it's just that. And there's a story around it. Story's not really that good at all. Very bad dialogue. I mean, literally, for the writing, the dialogue in it, literally there's a part that just made me bust up laughing just because of the writing. It was a doctor that literally just said, "I can't operate without any power." I literally said to myself while laughing, "No shit." And just in the middle of everybody in the theater. Because that doesn't need to be spelled out. When lights go out and you're a doctor or a surgeon and you're going to operate, it's kind of common sense you're not going to be operating. Especially when right up at the camera, it literally shows your tool just power off while the lights dim off. Obviously, it's common sense. You don't have to literally spell it out for everybody. And that's one of the things I really, really hated about Don't Breathe 2. They, on top of the amateur filmmaking, they also treated us like, not children, but they treat us like just idiots. We're idiots that only care about blood and gore. At least the first one had some intelligence value in it. Like, they cared about the setting, they cared about the dark levels, the black levels, the tone, the aesthetics, the setting. In Don't Breathe 2, they do that only to an extent, okay? These films are based off of a narrative setting of sound, of every other sense other than, sight. And they touch base on those elements in Don't Breathe 2 every now and again, but ultimately they didn't use those senses very well, at least in the filmmaking aspect of it. There was another gripe I had, and I don't fully remember it. It's been a couple hours since I saw the film. I don't fully remember it, but if it gets back to me, I'll let you know. Overall, though, Don't Breathe 2 is not bad. It's not terrible. It's just, filmmaking-wise, it's just juvenile. It's just a bloody, gory, juvenile mess. So, and the story is just awful. They try to expand the universe, I guess, but like I said, they took so many tropes, so many cliche from so many other things. The story just didn't work out. And plus, by the end, nobody was relatable. And in Don't Breathe 2, I did just remember this. In Don't Breathe 2, it starts out, and it continues throughout the film, at least up until about the halfway point, with this sense of ambiguity, like in the first one. There's just ambiguity in the air, and while you're watching it, you're just tense from how it's shot, and the ambiguity really sticks with you up until the halfway point. Then they start explaining and over-explaining and explaining everything, and that's where the downfall of Don't Breathe 2 happened. In Don't Breathe 1, there was always a sense of ambiguity. In Don't Breathe 2, they felt the need that they needed to explain literally everything. I couldn't tell you why. Because honestly, the ambiguity was even Don't Breathe 2's strongest point. So why they ditched that for the sake of just exposition everywhere, I don't know. And like I said, the dialogue is so bad. It is very clunky, and it just doesn't work at all in this film. So Don't Breathe 2 for me is a 6 out of 10. The first one I would probably give an 8 out of 10. Thank you.